The character of Batman in comic books and films and video games has always been a compelling figure, to young boys in particular.
He's pretty cool. He's one of my favorite heroes.
With his brooding, gothic aesthetic, his impressive strength and combat skills, and his habit of beating people up in ruthless fashion. His preeminence in pop culture as one of the most recognizable superhero figures, next to characters like Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Superman, is unmistakable, to the point that he is ubiquitously known, even by people who have no interest in the source material.
Warner Brothers is spending millions to bring millionaire Bruce Wayne and his alter ego to life. Is this a gamble for the studio? Will Batman pay off? Will there be bat hysteria? Sherry Claypool has this bat update.
But the Batman, like many modern heroes, is a fundamentally new type of character in the history of human culture, and marks a revolution against the idea of the heroic in all ages past. After spending time this fall reading further into Nietzsche's works of philosophy, and after viewing the most recent Batman film, directed and in part written by Matt Reeves and starring actor Robert Pattinson, I finally came to understand the root of the tension I've felt for so long with superhero media, and which is most exemplified in the stories of Batman. In this video, although I'll touch on the general archetype of the character of Batman and related characters in media, this analysis will primarily be based on the most recent iterations of the character on the big screen. Batman's ultimate function in Gotham is as a guardian, staving off the barbarians at the gates of Rome. The Batman is the most loyal Praetorian guard, defending the most decadent Caesar of Rome against the overwhelming tide of barbarians.
Defeat your emperor! I, Nero, Augustus Germanicus, command that you defeat your emperor!
He's loyal to an empire that increasingly has no place for him anymore, and resents him for what he is.
All anyone cares about in this place are these white, privileged assholes.
Wayne is an Englishman, out of time, in a city that has long turned against its English founding families.
The Waynes and the Arkhams, Gotham's founding families, but what is their real legacy?
The particular English character of the Wayne family is unmistakable, not just through his manner or his butler Alfred. The surname Wayne itself is an English surname, meaning a builder of wagons, which is in keeping with the industrious business nature of the family. Like his English ancestors hundreds of years before, Bruce Wayne forges his own armor and adopts a chivalric code for protecting the innocent, becoming a night warden of the city, and in the expanded comics, forms his own knightly order. But, in typical English style, his noble character, which gives him complete loyalty to his ideals, blinds him from recognizing and binds him from dealing with the reality of his world.
The story of Batman seems to draw upon ideas which we can find present in older English folklore and legends. In the story of Robin Hood, we have an earl, the Earl of Locksley, who is outlawed by King John and forced to take up an alter ego, Robin Hood, acting in disguise to administer justice and fight villainy. In the story of St. George and the Dragon, we have a noble knight who takes on the serpent, the symbol of chaos, to maintain and restore order. Batman seems to be at his best a personification of both of those things. He adopts an alter ego to take on the chaotic forces of the world, such as the Joker, who in The Dark Knight describes himself as an agent of chaos.
Upset the established order, and everything becomes chaos. I'm an agent of chaos.
But once we actually get into the details of these stories, we see some significant differences. The story of Robin Hood is often set in the absence of King Richard I, who has been off fighting in the Crusades and has been captured by his enemies on the continent. Now, in the pre-modern world, the king was not just a political figurehead, he was understood to be the embodiment of the Axis Mundi, the centre of the world. And in his person, order is established on a moral, social, and cosmological level. If he is removed, then the whole realm is plunged into chaos. And we see this in the absence of King Richard. His brother John, a wicked man, usurps the throne. He and his followers are corrupt and tyrannical. They abuse their power by robbing and killing their opponents. They take wealth that is not theirs to have. They take land which is not theirs to have. And those who oppose them, those who get in their way, meet a bloody end. Locksley is one of these characters. He is dispossessed by King John, and he is forced into Sherwood Forest to live a life as an outlaw. He takes on the mantle of Robin Hood, a vigilante as it were, but he is not just robbing the rich and giving to the poor as a sort of socialist revolutionary. Rather, he describes it as working for the common good, and in a way administering the king's justice in his absence. So he takes from the corrupt rich those who have stolen their wealth, and returns it and restores it to those who it rightfully belongs. He does this until the king returns. It's always in the promise that one day Richard I will return and restore justice and order to England. This is an idea of an eschatological nature, such as King Arthur one day returning to England in its hour of need to deliver it from evil and to restore the Golden Age, or more broadly, the Christian idea that Christ will return, overcome Satan, and a new heaven and earth will be made.
What becomes evident as one traces the history of the character and the representations of Gotham throughout the decades is that regardless of how many threats at the gates of the city that Batman defeats, and regardless of how many corrupt leaders are deposed, Gotham is in a state of terminal decline. The conditions that have allowed for the decadence and the corruption of Gotham stem from a much deeper source. No band-aid fix, no policy implementation, no social program, and no additional criminal thrown into Arkham Asylum will bring God back from the dead in the hearts of Gotham's people. Beyond the manifold problems of mental and physical health deterioration that are inherent when living in a post-industrial society, and the tendency towards social conflict brought about by dense urban living, akin to the Mouse Utopia experiment, the city of Gotham is not a sovereign country. It is bound to be ruled by national and international interests, to the political and moral agendas of monoliths such as BlackRock and Vanguard. Bane's neutron bomb and physical destruction of any bridges leading into and out of Gotham is his way of securing the city. But even such radical violent actions to cut off the outside world have no real hope of restoring the soul of Gotham. Among the crop of antagonists in the Batman lore, there lacks any true Uberman, anyone with both the will and the vision for imposing a better morality on the city. It's clear from the outset that Gotham is so fundamentally broken and decadent that it would collapse under its own weight from the endless villains and criminals that it breeds. It requires Batman to single-handedly hold the city from falling to destruction, from a combination of the consequences of its own horrendous management and the inherent anti-human structure of modern city design. The antagonists form the primary dialectic with Batman. Batman begins Ra's al Ghul lays it out explicitly.
Crime, despair. This is not how man was supposed to live. Every time a civilization reaches the pinnacle of its decadence, we return to restore the balance.
Gotham isn't beyond saving. Give me more time. There are good people here.
You are defending a city so corrupt we have infiltrated every level of its infrastructure.
He sees the diseases of Gotham as terminal, and works to accelerate its collapse by giving it a push over the edge. But Bruce Wayne, for all his outward courage, refuses to accept that the legacy of the Wayne family, in the form of Gotham itself, has been in the hands of evil men for many decades, has damned itself to destruction. Even the most courageous among us rarely has the courage to face what he already knows. The Joker, although seemingly deep and enigmatic in his philosophy, is simply a caged tiger, by nature prone to violence, and who, maddened by the awareness of being in a zoo and being attempted to be domesticated, instinctively lashes out at anything around him, seeking to destroy and set fire to his enclosure, even if it brings about total ruination. In the same strain as Bolshevik revolutionaries of the 20th century, the character Bane fights for the possibility of freeing the people from law and hierarchy, which is no longer carried by the moral authority of God. Bane seeks the full manifestation of the values of liberalism by unleashing the mass of regular people. But immediately, this liberating moment brings about far less freedom than the people of Gotham had before, under Bane's new criminal and ideological tyranny.
Do you feel in charge?
Liberal institutions cease to be liberal as soon as they are attained. Later on, there are no worse and no more thorough injurers of freedom than liberal institutions. One knows indeed what their ways bring. They undermine the will to power. They level mountain and valley and call that morality. They make men small, cowardly, and hedonistic. Every time it is the herd animal that triumphs with them. Liberalism, in other words, herd animalization. Bane's attempt is based on a false vision of mankind from the outset, and falters immediately upon its implementation when the mobs are set loose on the streets. You hire men. Learn this from me. In the marketplace, nobody believes in hire men, and if you want to speak there, very well. But the mob blinks. We are all equal. You hire men. Thus blinks the mob. There are no higher men. We are all equal. Man is man. Before God, we are all equal. Before God. But now that God has died, and before the mob, we do not want to be equal. You higher men. This God was your greatest danger. It is only since he lies in his tomb that you have been resurrected. Ra's al Ghul, although written as a straw man to be defeated, is ultimately correct when he says that Gotham is, on the whole, doomed.
No one can save Gotham. When the forest grows too wild, a purging fire is inevitable and natural. Tomorrow the world will watch in horror as its greatest city destroys itself. The movement back to harmony will be unstoppable this time.
Just as forests need lightning to strike the earth and burn away the underbrush to clear room for the forest to grow anew with new life, so too do civilizations need pressure on them to test their strength, to ensure they haven't grown too frail or too fat to stand on their own. But when forests are kept overly protected, never allowing any spark of danger to reach them, they build up dead wood and plant debris, amassing it to the point where once a fire does start and catch fuel, it burns so hotly, so widely, and so fiercely that it scorches the very soil itself, preventing any new life from growing there whatsoever. That is the danger of Gotham. In this way, so too can cities become so terminally ill with rot, and so fat and insulated from the consequences of their vices, that, Like with the ancient cities of Sodom, Gomorrah, and Carthage, only an overwhelming wave of fire puts an end to the squalor. But as a tragic consequence, the earth is salted, and new life cannot be restored.
In Gotham, the gods are dead. They've been killed by us. No one is coming to save Gotham. And thus, there is no higher order to preserve. There's no rule of law or justice that needs to be preserved, even in a weak form, until the king comes back. Nobody's coming to save it. It's all futile. It's just staving off the inevitable entropy and decay.
Now in the Batman films and comics, the antagonist who comes closest to embodying this great man, who is noble and has the natural power to impose their will upon the world, is the literal Ubermensch himself, the, directly translated, Superman. And naturally, as one should begin to expect, the Uberman becomes the natural enemy of the Batman. It's only when it becomes clear that the Superman does not seek to truly transform the world and leave his mark, that for all his willpower and might, this so-called Superman is just another defender of the establishment, that the Batman comes to a begrudging peace with him. The writers always tie any legitimate antagonist of Gotham with a poison pill. Antagonists of Gotham's social order always lack a sane morality, and so no true great man is allowed by the writers to ever truly confront the city and its caped crusader. Thus the Batman goes on, fighting strawman antagonists until the end of time, until Gotham, rots from within and becomes an unrecognizably decayed favela sometime in the 2080s, still defended unquestioningly by a geriatric Batman. The citizens of such a city, by this stage, are almost all mentally ill, impoverished, and entrapped by vice. Bruce Wayne denies the mantle of kingship, preferring to live in the shadows, on the fringes. Despite his heritage as a Wayne, a surname of English stock with a father who was a titan of industry and political leadership, Bruce forsakes the path of an open nobleman. But where Wayne falls short is his unwillingness to truly seize the reins of Gotham. He will disobey the tenets of society. He will break the law. He will even become a pariah if need be. But he will never choose to become king. One imagines that if anyone in Gotham had the will, the cunning, the financial means, and the motivation to become the real ruler of Gotham, it would be Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne recognizes that he must step over the man-made morality that binds ordinary men to the law in order to fight crime, but he doesn't extend this license to his own possibility of rulership. It's there, when it comes to exercising true power, that he draws the line. Aragorn, in The Lord of the Rings, also hides from his kingship over Gondor, despite his noble blood, until later on in the story where he embraces his bloodline and leads the free peoples of Middle-earth to victory. Batman's iconic personal rule, never to kill, has been discussed ad nauseum. Where does it come from in the mind of the author? Why is killing permitted for the police, but not for the vigilante? In chapter 9 of the Book of Romans, St. Paul outlines Christian morality for judgment and killing. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers hold no terror to those who do right, but for those who do wrong. Do you want to be free from fear of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will be commended. Because Batman is not sanctioned by the governing authorities, he denies himself the sword. But this clear holdover of Christian morality from the days before is no longer backed up by a real belief in the existence and the authority of God in the hearts and minds of the modern people of Gotham. Thus, Batman's code lacks any true divine authority behind it.
Police! Hands up! Stay still! Get out of here!
The Riddler represents those ordinary men who in a healthy society would be integrated properly, finding work, finding meaning, forming families.
Hey guys, thanks for all the comments and what this community has meant to me these weeks, these months. Let's just say none of us is alone anymore, okay?
But for the unwise rulership of the leaders of Gotham, these men have been pushed aside to the margins, fitting in with relevant themes of men being pushed to the side, as explored in other movies, from Fight Club to Taxi Driver to Blade Runner 2049. The film portrays the Riddler as a young, nerdy Caucasian male. This young man is brilliant and has both mass reach online, as well as a tightly organized group of other men around him, despite appearing to suffer from autism or some related condition.
And Bella Real will win. She promised real change. But we know the truth, don't we? You've seen Gotham's true face now. Together, we've unmasked it. It's corruption, it's perversion, masquerading under the guise of renewal.
Because they were mistreated and shunned throughout their lives, the Riddler's men seek to set up and watch from the side as a biblical flood washes away the city. But the Riddler, like the Joker, cannot restore or rebuild Gotham either. The Riddler and his followers have given in to their own weakness and resentment, and are exclusively preoccupied with tearing down the external cage of society, while never giving heed to the ways in which their own inner souls have become imprisoned by malice and resentment. When the anarchist, as the mouthpiece of the declining levels of society, insists on right, justice, equal rights with such beautiful indignation, he is just acting under the pressure of his lack of culture, which cannot grasp why he really suffers, what he is poor in life. A drive to find causes is powerful in him. It must be somebody's fault that he's feeling bad. Even his beautiful indignation does him good. All poor devils like to whine. It gives them a little thrill of power. Even complaints, the act of complaining, can give life, the charm on account of which one can stand to live it. There's a subtle dose of revenge in every complaint. One blames those who are different for one's own feeling bad, and in certain circumstances even being bad, as if they were guilty of an injustice, a prohibited privilege. If I'm a lowlife, you should be one too. On this logic, revolutions are built. Batman's whole life is dedicated to preventing the most aggressive mice in their mice utopia from destroying the experiment, while never taking control and ending the modern experiment himself. It provides no path upward from the muck and the shadow of the alleys. The false dialectic between the quite literally cartoonish villains on one hand and the masked vigilante on the other leaves little room for any alternative. It's a false choice, with no one to root for who has a true vital and higher spiritual vision for the city. This marks a sharp distinction on the types of heroes and men that we worship today. The great man of the late 20th and 21st century saves the world by protecting it from anyone who would significantly change the established order. The hero of all ages prior to the 20th century was the man who upset the balance and imposed either his will or his national will and his vision and morality on the world. Superheroes are allowed and promoted as so-called heroes in modernity, because not only do they pose no danger to the established order, but they channel their qualities of ambition, of strength, of intelligence, and self-sacrifice into defending the established order at all costs against any figure who threatens to change it. This is fine and good when the established order is oriented towards the divine and towards the promotion of vital and virtuous life. But when the established order is a city like Gotham, driving the souls and bodies of people into the dirt, then the defense of this kind of order is a defense of death and immorality itself. At the end of every superhero film, the world and the nations involved return to the exact state that they began in at the outset of the story, and they call it a victory. The so-called victories of superheroes form a stagnant, closed loop, with no room for change, for better and for worse. An Alexander the Great, a Julius Caesar, an Arminius, a Napoleon, a Saint Olaf, a Vladimir the Great, a Sun Tzu, a Gustavus Adolphus, a Vice Admiral Horatio Nelson, an Alfred the Great, a Charlemagne. These would all be villains to the morality of 20th and 21st century superheroes, because they fight to truly bring about a new age and change the map and the morality of the world.
With St. George, this story is based on an older archetype, the Chaos Camp, which is the idea of a warrior god who is defender of the current order, slaying a monster who embodies chaos, often associated with the sea. We see this with Yahweh and Leviathan, for example, or Zeus and Typhon. And when the warrior god wins this battle, it's often a rite of passage, which allows him to become king or reassert his kingship. In turn, it allows him to either re-establish or remake the world. So when Marduk slays Tiamat, using Tiamat's corpse, Marduk forms the heavens and the earth. In a smaller way, as the myths develop into more a knight taking on a dragon like St. George, we find that he too, even though he does not take on the mantle of kingship or of divinity, remakes the world. The story of St. George is as such. There was a dragon which assaulted a city, and to pacify it, the king and his people agreed to offer it sacrifices. At first, it was sheep, but then the dragon demanded that people be sacrificed to it, and eventually, cast by lots, the king's daughter was selected. She is tied up, ready to be devoured by this dragon, and St. George arrives on the scene. He disarms the dragon, he smites it with his spear, and using her girdle, he chains it up. He then parades it into the city, and he tells the people there that if they repent, that they believe in God and Jesus Christ and are baptized, he will slay the dragon. The people, 15,000 men, were baptized, and he slays the dragon. And so he remakes the moral order and religious climate of that city. But when we come to Batman, there is no demand upon the people that he chooses to serve. There is no obligation he places on them for defeating the dragons in Gotham. Rather, there is no self-reflection or repentance on their side. And as such, there is no dealing with the root problems. They never ask why such villains emerge in their city. What is it about their moral and social order which allows for men like the Joker or Bane to arise? Thus Batman staves off the effects of this city, but he never deals with the root cause, its immorality.
This recent genre hides in itself the transvaluation of morals, which has inverted the masculine heroic impulse to lead, to conquer, and to build brotherhoods and to establish dynasties, into purely defending and serving the institutions of the state. This extraordinary transvaluation that's happened in culture over the last 100 years neuters and domesticates heroes and the men who idolize them into infertile tools of the ruling regime. The real illusion of Batman is that while he appears to act outside of the law, and to be a figure of vigilantism with a moral compass unswayed by the corrupt institutions of the city, he ultimately is the greatest defender of stagnation and corruption, by defeating any would-be great man who could bring their own independent vision to Gotham. The Batman is also analogous to a gargoyle. He appears to be at first a terrifying creature of the dark, but is revealed to only be attached to the building, outward facing. The gargoyle is seemingly anathema to the structure of the cathedral, a demonic creature which would be expected to tear down the building and attack those inside. But instead of doing so, it's a part of the superstructure. It faces down and frightens any real beings of the outside world who could truly destroy or remake the structure. Except that where this analogy fails is that Gotham is no cathedral. For all of its Gothic architecture, there's no dedication to God, no dedication to anything higher than the self, but instead Gotham is a church dedicated to greed, vice, and suppression of will. The Batman is the gargoyle that wards off anyone with the will or the true capacity to crush such evils of the city. Cultural regimes' subversion is in turning masculine heroic characters like the Batman, a figure representing justice and chivalric defense and independent action, into Sodom's greatest defender. Like a noble dog fighting to protect a twisted, murderous owner, the city Bruce Wayne defends resents him and those like him and rewards his loyalty and honor by hunting him down, only allowing him to walk among them freely when they become dependent on him to save the entire city. In Joseph Campbell's comparative mythology, we find it's rarely that the superhero actually seizes the sword. They may claim a piece of armor or weaponry or magical item, but to truly seize the sword means seizing authority. Superheroes such as Batman, in rejecting authority, means that he can only save the city from its outermost threats, cannot truly save the soul of his realm. Without the justification of authority from a divine source, we see these so-called superheroes wallow in a state of uncertainty, never knowing what authority they truly have. And so Bruce Wayne returns to the shadows of his cave, living like an outcast, never fully fulfilling his role as the king. Imagine if in Return of the King, Aragorn were to help fight the forces of Mordor in the final battle at the gates of Mount Doom, only to give up Anduril, the Flame of the West, and retreat back to his past life as Strider, throwing aside his mantle of kingship, and letting Gondor wallow in decay. It would be an archetypal betrayal of himself and of the people of Gondor, and leave the story unfulfilled. The only path upward for Batman is to truly embrace the noble heritage of the House of Wayne, and like those in his ancestral Arthurian legends, seize the sword from the stone with both hands, and claim his rightful kingship over Gotham, replanting the realm in the deep roots of its English past, and giving it a foundation from which it can rebuild its future. Before you go, if you liked this video, I've got a bunch of other content just like it in a playlist I've linked here. And I want to give an extra warm thank you to Dr. Nathan Hood for contributing to this video and providing his insights on the topic. He has his own channel where he produces some amazing videos diving way deeper into English mythology, folklore, tradition, into Tolkien. It's all on his channel. So go check it out, tell him I sent you, it would mean the world to me. And stay tuned because there's a bunch more really exciting content coming soon. Now leave your thoughts too in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you see it another way? I want to hear from you. Getting to hear from you guys is my favorite part of the process. I read all the comments, I go through it all. It's a lot of fun. So hit me up with your thoughts right here. For Nordhooker, I'm Matt. See you very soon.